This is Steve with Rocky Mountain ATVMC, and today I'm going to show you how to install our Tusk Mohawk Extreme Duty high clearance radius rods on a Polaris RZR XP4 1000. There's lots of different kinds of suspension systems out there for UTVs. Now the ones that utilize radius rods are generally used in a high performance long travel application. Now the downside to using radius rods is they are susceptible to overcoming obstacles and getting damaged. So we've come up with our Tusk Mohawk Extreme Duty high clearance suspension components, which are much stronger and have a much better overall design to give you more clearance where you need it most. And they come in a bunch of different colors. Now these radius rods work much better than most because of that extra clearance, especially over large rocks or obstacles out on the trail. Now you can replace just the lower radius rod as it will work with the stock OEM upper radius rod or vice versa. So today I'm going to show you how to replace both of them on this 2019 Polaris RZR XP4 1000. Now these procedures that I'm going to show you will be very similar on your 2014 and newer RZR 2 and 4-seater XP 1000 and turbo models. To do this job, you'll need some basic hand tools, a torque wrench, gloves, and safety glasses, along with a copy of your OEM service manual for more information, proper procedures, and specs. You will also need your Tusk Mohawk Extreme Duty high clearance radius rods. I've got the Tusk Mohawk radius rods here along with the OEM ones from Polaris. Now you can obviously see that they are built much stronger along with the amount of clearance that you will gain by using these. The first thing we need to do is raise our machine so that we can remove our suspension components. Now make sure when you do this that you do it in a safe manner so that you don't cause injury to yourself or damage to the machine. Now let's remove the lug nuts and the rear wheel. Now you can do this job simultaneously with the other side, but I found that it's much easier just to do one side at a time, and you just repeat the same process with the other side. We're going to start by removing the lower radius rod hub bolt. Anytime you remove a nylon lock nut, the Polaris manual recommends that you replace it with a new one. If you're not replacing the lower, then go ahead and fast forward and you'll see the installation of the upper. You might need to pull up on the hub itself to get the bolt out. Now you can see here that the radius rod is mounted between the frame and the center support plate. We'll go ahead and remove this bolt and remove the radius rod. Now let's grab our Tusk Mohawk lower radius rod and two of the stainless steel spacers and two of the O-rings that come in the kit. Now don't get the spacers confused with the tall ones, you need two short ones for this part. Now what we want to do is we want to take the two short spacers, we want to install them in the outer of the radius rod, and we want to trial fit it into the hub. Now the reason we want to do that is there is a small variance in the manufacturing process in the hub, and so some of these will be a little tighter fit than others. And so if that's the case, then we will take a little file and we will file the flat surface in there to gain that extra clearance. Then we can go ahead and take these back out, install our O-rings over them, and then install them back in the radius rod. Now for the most part it slid right in. There is a little bit of tension on one side, so we'll use the file and just take a teeny bit off so that it slides all the way. Now that we've got our clearance where we want it, let's move to the other side of the radius rod. Now we want to take a tall stainless steel spacer and a short one and install those into the end of the radius rod. Now the tall one will sit against the frame and the short one will sit against the center support plate. Then we can install the bolt. Now let's go back over to the hub side of the radius rod and install the two O-rings, two short stainless steel spacers, and then we'll go ahead and install that into the hub with the bolt and nut. Now again, you may need to pull up on the hub assembly to get the radius rod to line up. Now on the older machines, they have a 10mm bolt. If you have the 10mm bolt, just go ahead and torque both of them to 40 foot-pounds. Now on the newer models, they have a 12mm bolt. We need to torque those to 100 foot-pounds. Now that we have the lower radius arm installed, I need to point out one quick thing. If you are running the radius rods with the stock OEM trailing arm, On the very bottom of the trailing arm, back where it mounts to the hub, and where the lower radius arm is mounted, there's a corner. Now there's not enough clearance on this corner, it will actually end up hitting the radius rod in full compression of your suspension. So what you need to do is measure in about a ½ inch and just cut that off. And then it will clear just fine and work just fine. Now that we've got the lower radius rod installed, we would just repeat that same process for the other side. Now keep in mind you can run the Mohawk lowers with the stock uppers and vice versa. So for the guys that are going to install the uppers, just keep that in mind. Now at this point we would just install our wheel and torque that to the manufacturer specification, but we're going to leave the wheel off and go ahead and install the upper radius rods so that you know how to do that too. Let's go ahead and remove the hub radius rod bolt, and we'll follow that up by removing the upper frame radius rod bolt. Now you might need to lift up on the hub assembly to remove the bolt. Now we'll just pull the radius rod up from one side and remove it from the frame side. Now let's grab our upper Mohawk radius rod, 2 of the short spacers and 2 of the O-rings. Now don't get the spacers confused with the tall one, because the tall one will go on the other end. Now what we want to do is install the spacers into the end of the radius rod without the O-rings first so that we can trial fit it. It's kind of a lot like the lower one, but we need to do that on the upper as well. Now the hub from the manufacturer varies in the clearance for the radius rod, and so if that's the case, we need to take a file if it's too tight and just take a little teeny bit off so that it's a nice tight fit. Then we can install the O-rings on the spacers and then install the radius rod into the hub. Now that we've got our clearance where we want it, let's go ahead and slide the radius rod back out. We'll remove the spacers and put the O-rings in them and then install them back into the radius rod. Now we want to take a tall spacer along with a short spacer and install those. Now the tall one will go against the frame and the short one will go against the center support plate. Now when you install the upper part, go from the top side of the center support plate. It makes it a lot easier, and then you can fish the other side under the brake line into the hub. Once you get the holes lined up, go ahead and install the bolts. Now again, remember that the hub side of the radius arm, you might need to lift up on it so that you can install the bolt. Now in the older models, they have a 10mm bolt, and we need to torque those to 40 foot-pounds. And on the newer models, they have a 12mm bolt, which we need to torque those to 100 foot-pounds. Now let's reinstall the tire and torque it to the manufacturer's specification. Now that we have that torqued, we just need to repeat the same process on the other side. And that's it. That's all there is to installing new radius rods on your Polaris RZR. Come check us out at RockyMountainATVEMC.com for more parts, apparel, and accessories. And remember, all orders over $75 ship for free. And make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is Steve. We'll catch you next time.